Good evening. My name is Adam Jacobs, and I'm the Operations Manager for the Department of Public Works, and I'm in charge of highway and equipment maintenance at 80 Turkey Hill Road. I'd like to discuss the proposed Public Works Facility Capital Improvement Project, also on site at 80 Turkey Hill Road. If I could just give you a little bit of background on the current facility. Construction started on the current facility in 1973. It's a pre-engineered steel frame Butler type building. In 1976, as the town grew, the Department of Public Works was formed, and the building, some staff, and vehicles were assumed from the road agent at the time. And then in the mid-1980s, we decided we needed to bring our fleet maintenance in-house, and 2 additional maintenance bays and a parts room were added to come up to the current area of 9,200 square feet. Also inside is a second-floor mezzanine with some personnel spaces and a welding bay, which brings the total square footage to 11,492 square feet. At the bottom, as we all know, the town population grew significantly from 1973 to 2014. But along with that came the staff at the building, as well as the number of vehicles in the highway department, which are stored on site at 80 Turkey Hill. Here's a picture of the frontage of the existing building, roughly broken into 3 parts. On the left side there, any of the people spaces, personnel and admin. The center is for highway division work, and the right side is equipment maintenance, fleet maintenance division. Brief list of spaces that are involved in the personnel spaces: reception and dispatch, and the combination lunch and training room, small locker room, any of the offices, restrooms, utility rooms, and then dry storage and plan and file storage. Here's a picture of the locker room. A couple issues with the current locker room. Space is obviously a concern for 27 employees. There's no female facilities on site, and the room adjacent to the locker room is the utility room with the air compressor, and when that fires off, it's loud enough inside the locker room to actually require hearing protection. Now moving on into the highway division area, the 2 bays there. In this space, all the repairs and inspection of highway equipment and parks maintenance equipment is done, as well as any spillover from next door and equipment maintenance from the rest of the town fleet, police, fire, any of those vehicles. If there's not enough room, that moves over into the highway bays. All vehicle preservation, so washing, highway trucks, police vehicles, equipment is all done inside those bays, as well as any small engine repair, wood projects, steel, welding, sign repair work, a lot of general workshop type items that need floor space are done there. As well as in the last couple of years, we've started a brine making program which provides anti-icing. Rather than put rock salt down at the beginning of the storm, we've started making brine, which can be done before a storm starts. But that takes up floor space as well. And then anything that's left is used for storage and staging, mainly of our emergency response fleet, loaded plow trucks, so they don't have to get loaded up during the storm itself. They can be preloaded with material that would otherwise freeze and pulled into the bays, so they'll be warm and ready to go at night. And then anything that's climate sensitive, something that has a water tank or an older piece of equipment that is hard starting, or diesel equipment, the diesel gels up when it's really cold outside. So any of those type of equipment are also brought inside if we have space. Here's a picture from the second floor mezzanine inside the highway bays looking out, sort of the general sense of a lot of different things going on. This is at the end of the day, prepared for an overnight. Various equipment in there. In this particular day, we had room for one plow truck in the back right, loaded up with a mix of sand and salt for emergency response. Now moving on to the other side of the wall with the equipment maintenance division. This is where the mechanics work. There's 2 double bays plus a small welding bay on the back side that was added sometime later, and a parts room and a foreman office. In this space, the maintenance of all the rest of the town vehicles is done, anything for the Department of Public Works, but also the police department vehicles, all the fire vehicles, as well as cars for Parks and Recreation and Community Development departments. One of the main issues that we have with the current space is the amount of head space and height inside the building itself. Our doors are slightly undersized compared to what they would be for a building that's constructed in modern day, but the real problem is once the equipment gets inside the building, we can't lift it up to full height. Some of the taller equipment, such as a fire truck that you see in the background there, or a transfer station trailer, or loader, bucket loader at Highway Division, these are too tall, so once they're lifted to be able to get underneath and work properly, they hit the top of the ceiling inside the building. So they're brought outside. There was a special concrete pad poured years ago to allow this, so it wouldn't sink into the ground. And the mobile lifts are brought outside to lift this equipment, which works okay for a few months a year. Another issue, in addition to bay height, is bay length. So we've got a few long pieces of equipment, such as the fire apparatus, but also the trailers that haul trash from the transfer station to Pennacook daily, especially if they're hooked to the tractor trailer, in which case they're longer than the highway garage, and they can't both be inside at the same time. So normally they'll either be disassembled and the trailer will be left inside where it takes up the entire bay length, or they'll be brought outside for a project. And we try to schedule things like brake jobs for the summer months, but that only works until a storm comes through. So Councilor Yakuboff gave you a little rundown on the project development, so I'll try to be brief with this. HKT Architects was hired last year as a design firm, and they came in and made some inspections of the existing facility. They had a structural engineer come with, and he was able to take a look at the buildings we have, the steel that was there, and make some determinations about reuse of the existing building or not. They also passed out some surveys to the entire staff, and then anyone that was interested, they tried to get an interview from them to talk about the work we do and how the space is currently used. So all that information is then used to develop a space needs assessment, which takes the number of employees, the number of equipment on site, and then the work that we do, and they say what size space should you have for that type of work. At this point, the committee came in also and started to work in tandem as building options were developed, how these rooms are clustered together, and how a site layout might be worked. And then some of the cost estimates started to come out from the professional design firm. Using some estimates, there's not a whole lot of public works facilities being built in the area, a lot in Massachusetts, so the prices were high, and some of the estimates on size were very high. So at the upper end, they were talking about $8.9 million for a 55,000 square foot building. That was one that would level everything on the site and build completely new from the ground up, and that also provided storage and staging for almost the entire highway fleet. So it was a huge facility, but clearly not something that we, A, wanted, and B, thought would work for the town of Merrimack. So the committee got together and started to look at some of the things that went into that estimate, and decided that some of the cost per square foot wasn't reasonable for the area or for our desires. So we basically came out of the committee with a recommendation for a smaller building, a new construction, only for the people spaces and for the fleet maintenance bays, really the most intensive two areas, and came down to 13,965 square feet for those two areas together, which is a little larger than the existing space. And that cost was $2.8 million. That includes all soft costs and site work associated. Proposed to also be a pre-engineered steel frame, try to save as much money as we can on the design end of things. Also recommended is reuse of the existing garage, but not in the current use. We try to knock that use down to just become a big steel box to park and store equipment. And that would provide us with 9,200 square feet for storage and staging of most of our highway fleet. And this is really 10 or 12 trucks that could be loaded up and hit the road during a storm immediately and provide that emergency response for a price tag of $500,000, and that would be for reskinning, re-roofing, some utility and insulation and code compliance upgrades, which brings to the total project cost on the warrant of $3.3 million for just over 23,000 square feet. As you see here, the top picture is one of the proposed site locations, and this is the back side of the highway garage that we saw earlier. That on the right side is the back of the highway garage. It's used for parking, and there's an old shed that will be demolished if this project were to go through. And on the bottom is a conceptual mock-up of a modern public works facility, more for scaling, to get an idea of what this type of square footage would look like compared to the old building. And if you'll notice, the last bay door on the right is gone. That's the welding bay, which was deemed structurally unsound by the engineers that came. I'll turn it over to Paul for some bond discussion.
Currently, we're looking at a 25-year bond for the $3.3 million. Estimated interest rate's about 5%. This is estimated bond repayment schedule, lasts from 2015 to 2040. First year is $85,000 for interest. That's about 3 cents on the tax rate. Year two, which is usually the highest year during a bond, would be a total of 10 cents on the tax rate. Total for the bond would be principal of $3.3 million. Total to include interest would be right around $5.4 million over a 25-year period.
As we talk about this project, there are three real driving forces for a new garage that we feel are important. Number one is the health and safety of our public service employees that work in the building daily. Number two is asset protection. So we've got about $3.5 to $4 million of fleet that the town has invested a good amount of money in. That's all stored at the highway site right now. Having a larger space to work on this, a better space to work on it, more indoor storage, and being out of the elements would allow us to continue our shift towards more preventative nature repairs rather than corrective repairs. So that, in the end, leads to a longer asset lifetime. So we could add a year or two to the replacement schedule for most of the highway fleet. And then another benefit is less fuel consumption, less idling. As vehicles are stored inside, you don't have to warm them up or leave them running as an operator pops inside to use the bathroom, and that all adds up over time. And then the third leg is maximizing the level of service to the public. So that all comes in the form of labor savings, especially at the beginning of a storm. We'll be able to get crews out on the road faster. During the storm, there's less time off the task of either plowing or sanding the roads. And then if we have a breakdown, there's more bay space available and better space available to allow that equipment to get fixed and back on the road faster rather than sitting out in the parking lot waiting for a bay to open up as another piece of equipment is fixed. Looking at the current site, there's a couple of reasons why just doing a major renovation of the existing facility isn't feasible. Number one, first and foremost, is the facility itself is undersized for the current operations. So that's both the staff but also the tasks that are done and the equipment that's been purchased and used in town. As we talked about, the roof heights are too low and the bays are too short and too narrow for large equipment. So if we try to expand these bays and the building itself to raise the roof, for example, anything that we do changes the structure of the building and adds load to the roof. Right now, we're already exceeding the current snow loading for this area under an exception, which is okay until we get about a foot of snow or more, in which case we'd have to shovel it off. But any major changes to the building trigger code compliance from stem to stern, and that would be rather expensive. You'd basically be recreating the building at that point to build a new roof. Also, we get the added benefit if we don't renovate the current building for the same use, but instead just use it for parking, storage, and staging, then we get that at a lower cost than it would if we had to come in from a greenfield and build a new foundation and build a building from the ground up. And then finally, there's a swing space issue when you renovate a building. You have to figure out what to do with all these people and all this equipment in the interim, several months or up to a year for the site. Using the current building as it is until the new facility would be finished would allow no swing space needs. Okay, at this point, that's all I have for the presentation, so I guess we'd turn it over to the floor.